Viragwan, one quick question. You expect us to unmute ourselves, or will the moderator be doing?
Launcher.
And Mr. Raghavan second.
Yes.
Pankaj Patel third. And the director is not joined yet. No, have you played the video? You played. Yes. Video played to Maripas.
ಮಾತಾಡ್ಬೇಡಿ ಆಡಿ ಹೋಗುತ್ತೆ ಒಂದು ನಿಮಿಷ
Hello and welcome to the 80th Synergia Forum, the 16th in our series of virtual forums. And the topic for discussion today is something that's perhaps of most crucial importance to humanity as a whole at this stage. It's not just about the pandemic, though the pandemic and the cure for it dominates the discussion. This is about finding novel and affordable healthcare to a variety of issues and innovations and challenges that medical science faces on that count. And of course, as always, we've got the finest minds from around the world to discuss that issue, starting with Dr. Chas Bountra, Pro Vice Chancellor, Innovation at the Oxford University. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, Professor K. Vijayaraghavan, who is the Principal Scientific Advisor to the Government of India, a man who's a bridge between science and government, as tough as that it may be. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We have with us Pankaj Patel, a stalwart from Indian pharma industry, chairman of Zydus Cadila. Sir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And we have Mr. Sharat Tyagi, Managing Director of Boehringer Ingelheim India Private Limited and the President of the Organization of Pharmaceutical Producers of India. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me here.
Right, the format, as I explained to our panelists a short while ago, is very simple. Each of the speakers who are high profile and understand the subject at great depth will make their opening remarks. After that, we will have a quick interaction between them, between the moderator, and a question and answer session, following which we will have an intervention from our special guests who will join us this evening, as well as from Synergia Foundation, Samrata Shetty, and the President of Synergia Foundation, Toby Simon. So without wasting any further time, may I call upon you, Dr. Chas Bountra, for your opening remarks and set the tone for this discussion this evening.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and thank you very much, Toby and Sambrata, for the invite. Let me just dive straight in. So let me share with you some of the things I worry about on a daily basis. I worry that as a community, we are not producing enough new medicines. I worry that increasingly those medicines are becoming unaffordable. I also worry that across biomedical research, there is a lot of duplication. And I also worry when I talk to my colleagues in industry, they say that often 50, 60, 70% of the time, they cannot reproduce academic literature. I think these are major challenges. But before I mean, the outline of this talk, I'll talk a little bit about what I think is the problem. I'll share with you some of the things that we've done here in Oxford over the past few months, past few years. And I'll share with you some of the things that we're currently doing, and then I'll wrap up. So in terms of the problem, if we think of what patients want, what patients' relatives want, what their carers want, or what does society want? I think what they want is they want more novel, effective, affordable therapies, and they want them quickly. Let me just share with you a few metrics. Now, the population of India is nearly 1.4 billion, something like this. The population of the UK is about 68 million. So the UK is about 1/20th of the India's population, about 5%. So I know the numbers in the UK. I apologize, I don't know them in India, but I think you can reasonably translate. So in the UK, in the next 12 months, 350,000 people will get diagnosed with cancer. That is one person every 90 seconds. That is 1,000 people every day. And across the planet, 14 million people in the next 12 months will get diagnosed with cancer. I worry a lot about dementia. So in the UK currently, we have 850,000 people with dementia. In 2050, that number is going to be 2.1 million. All of us who live to more than 80 years of age, 1 in 6 of us will have dementia. We've not come up with a new treatment for Alzheimer's since 2002. And that's not for want of trying. I mean, the industry has been pouring money into this area. Aging, we have aging societies across the world. In the next 12 months, there's going to be a massive increase in the number of elderly patients. That's just going to continue to escalate. We expect that in the next 20 years, there's going to be a 180% increase in the number of pensioners, so over 65, with cancer. 180% increase with cancer. So almost a tripling. We're expecting a 120% increase in patients with diabetes, so more than a doubling. Mental health, massive challenge. It's estimated across Europe that 25% of individuals have some sort of mental health episode during their life. Maybe 20% suffer from depression at some point in their life. And I've heard in the UK that if we look at 15-year-old girls, out of every 150 girls aged 15 years old, about 1 out of 150 will have an eating disorder, anorexia or bulimia. These are staggering figures. And I think post-COVID, I think the mental health challenges are going to be exacerbated across all societies. Antimicrobial resistance, you know, at the moment, 700,000 people a year are dying because they are resistant to existing antibiotics. It's been estimated that by 2050, if we don't come up with a new generation of antibiotics, we will have 10 million people dying every year because of that resistance. And Jim O'Neill estimated that we need, sorry, is the sound okay?
That's perfect. It's all right. It's just a bit of an echo.
By 2050, it's estimated if we don't come up with a new generation of antibiotics, it's going to cost the planet something like $100 trillion loss in global production. I mean, these are staggering figures. Rare diseases, there's 7,000 rare diseases. 30% of those kids do not reach the age of 5. It takes 6 to 8 years to get a diagnosis, and 95% of those patients, there is no treatment. And across the world, if you add up all patients with rare diseases, it's more than 350 million. So we desperately need new drugs in all of these areas. So what have we been doing in Oxford over the past few years to try and tackle some of these challenges? So one of the things we've been doing is we've decided to try and pool resources to share risk. So currently we're working with nine large pharmaceutical companies, including Boehringer Ingelheim. We're working with several patient organizations. We have lots of funding from the Wellcome Trust and the UK government. And we've been pooling these resources to share risk. The second thing we've done is that we've chosen to work only on completely novel ideas. I'm not interested in working on things where there's already 50 labs across the planet doing it, or there's already 100 publications. We've decided deliberately to work on completely novel things, and often things that people think are impossible or intractable. And what we do for those novel genes or proteins is we generate tools. So starting points for drug discovery, starting points for generating a small molecule inhibitor or an antibody, etc., etc. These tools are very high quality. They're high quality because we're working with these 9 large pharmaceutical companies. So by doing that, we're trying to drive innovation. The third thing we do, and this is probably what makes us most unique, is that all of these tools that we generate, we take out no intellectual property. We don't patent them. We make them freely available. As a consequence, we're now working with more than 300 academic labs all over the world. This is a way of crowdsourcing science. And then the fourth thing we do is that all of our data and knowledge and reagents, we share it with the world immediately. We don't sit on it for 12 months while we're writing up a manuscript, because we don't want anybody in the world doing something that we've already done, because that's just a waste of time and resource. So 4 things: pool resources to share risk, work in novel, impossible areas to drive innovation, make everything freely available to crowdsource science, and release everything to the world immediately to reduce duplication and wasting. The second thing we've been doing, and this is a project that literally is kicked off in the past 4 or 5 months. So about 3 years ago, we developed a platform in Oxford. So my colleagues, Frank von Delft, Paul Brennan, Chris Schofield, and David Stewart, absolute geniuses in their field, they developed a platform which allows us to identify binders, small molecule binders, to proteins that people think are undruggable or intractable. And this platform involves high throughput crystallography. And so what they've been doing is they've been screening libraries of compounds using high throughput crystallography. So they can screen maybe 1,000 compounds overnight and come in the morning and look at 1,000 lots of data. And this is a platform they developed about 3-4 years ago. And then in the past 4 months, what they've done during this COVID crisis, they've identified a new target for treating COVID infections. They've screened a whole library of compounds. They've identified lots of small molecule inhibitors. And all of that data that they've generated, they've immediately shared it with the whole world. And now we've got chemists in India and Africa and Australia and Brazil, literally all over the world. And they are taking that data and they are optimizing those molecules with a view to generating a clinical molecule. Many of these people in India or Africa, my colleagues have never met, but this is a way of getting the global community to focus on a particular problem. So this is called a moonshot program. This has literally happened in the past 3 or 4 months. And like I said, they've already got quite potent compounds, which they're now progressing. So that's the moonshot program. The third thing that's happened literally over the past few weeks in Oxford, so our Vice Chancellor, Louise Richardson, our Regius Professor of Medicine, John Bell, the head of the medical school, Gavin Screeton, 2 founders, Adrian Hill and Sarah Gilbert, of this company called Vaxitech, and a brilliant clinician named Andrew Pollard. All of these individuals worked with the UK government. They worked with regulators. They worked with funders. They worked with AstraZeneca. And they've created a partnership, literally, as you know, to generate 1 billion samples of this vaccine as quickly as possible. And now AstraZeneca have also given a license to the Serum Research Institute in India to generate another 1 billion samples. This has literally happened in the past few weeks, this partnership. And all of these partners, they've got a single goal, and that goal is to generate a vaccine which is effective and safe as quickly and as cheaply as possible. It's amazing what we can do if we all put our minds to it. So that's the vaccine program. So those are some of the things that we've been doing in Oxford. Let me share with you what we're now doing. So we're now so in Oxford now, we're creating about 25 companies a year. So it's one every 2 weeks. We could probably double that if we wanted to. We're also trying to attract global industry into Oxford. We're trying to attract more entrepreneurs into Oxford. We're building more innovation space because we believe we've got to take our research that we're doing in the university and we need to translate it. We need to create benefit for patients. We need to create benefit for industry. We need to create benefit for society and the economy, etc. I'm also encouraging my colleagues in Oxford to do is to really be ambitious. Focus on big global problems, big global challenges, and let's come up with big global solutions. And one of the things I'm focused on is trying to create new industries. You know, it's staggering. If I think across the world now, there's probably 4 or 5 companies that are worth more than $1 trillion. So Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, all of them worth more than $1 trillion. All of these are data technology companies. I believe in the next decade, somebody is going to create a healthcare data technology company, and that company is going to be worth $1 trillion. If you look at the pharmaceutical companies at the moment, you know, the most valuable by market cap, I think, is Johnson & Johnson, but even that is only about 400 billion. So here we're talking about more than $1 trillion. And I think one of the consequences of this pandemic is that I hope that there is even more investment in healthcare, and I hope that there is even more international partnership. Let me just finish with a question that I've often been asked in the recent weeks. Many people have said to me, why is so much happening in Oxford? I mean, at the moment, in the UK, Oxford University seems to be in the media on a daily basis. And so many colleagues have said, why is this? What's so special about Oxford? I would say just 2 things. People, people, people. You know, this place, we attract brilliant students. We have some phenomenal researchers, and we have some terrific faculty. We've also got a wonderful alumni network all over the world. And in this ecosystem, we've got some amazing leaders, some brilliant innovators, and some fantastic entrepreneurs. It's such a wonderful, energizing ecosystem to work in. The second thing I would say, of course, we've got lots of resource and infrastructure and so on and so forth. But many other places have got lots of infrastructure and resource, etc. I think the other key ingredient is the culture. So I mentioned John Bell earlier on and Gavin Squeeton, and what many of my colleagues like this have done over the past 20, 30 years in Oxford is they've created a culture where there's a recognition that we've got some big problems to solve in the world, and the only way we're going to solve them is by coming together, by working across disciplines, across departments, across divisions, working with industry, working with governments, working with regulators, working with patient groups, and importantly, working with other countries. You know, these have to be big international endeavors. Coming up with a new drug for Alzheimer's, or cracking sort of climate change, or more affordable energy, or reducing pollution, these are big problems, and we need to come together to solve these problems. I'll finish now by saying I was fortunate. Throughout my career, I've worked with some amazing individuals. And one of the most amazing is a guy named Tashi Yamada, who was head of R&D at GSK, and then he became head of R&D at the Gates Foundation, and then Takeda, and now I think he's working on the West Coast. Tashi Yamada always used to say to me, he said, Chaz, patients are waiting. And I would just leave you with that. And I think, you know, especially in the past few months, we've seen a virus move from one side of the world to the other. It has already killed, I think, close to 700,000 people on the planet. It has destroyed the lives of millions of people. In the UK, I can tell you in the next few months, many companies are going to go under. Many, probably 1 million more people or more will lose their jobs. And some countries are going to go into recession. You know, I think what we're all trying to do together in healthcare, to be honest, I can't think of anything more important. So Toby, thank you for the invite, and thank you all for listening to me, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for that. Well, the research that you're doing is a very promising thing. However, the final comments that you made make us feel very pessimistic and scared about the potential outcomes that we would have to face as we tread along this road. But thank you so much, Chaz Boundra, for those insights. Fascinating to hear from you on what's happening. You told us what's happening inside Oxford. I want to shift over to our next
high-profile panelist, Professor K. Vijayaraghavan, sir. What's happening outside of Oxford and inside governments and in the rest of the world? Can you elucidate for us?
Thank you very much. And
So you need to unmute yourself.
yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. Let me start by looking at some aspects which seem relatively unrelated to the current pandemic. And those are three subjects. One is that of climate change in general. The second is the environment, and the third is ecology. All these three are areas which, as a planet, we have neglected somewhat at the altar of current economically inexpensive, cheap goods of high quality. In other words, by postponing our attention to these three areas, we have got consumer goods and an economy at much lower cost than it would be if we paid attention to these three. The result of this is the planet now is at a stage where it requires urgent attention, not just by individual governments, but by all of us citizens of this planet as a whole. How did this happen? This happened because, for example, let's take ecology. We have a situation where human-animal proximity has increased so much that the likelihood of spillover of a disease from other animals to humans have increased because we've been buying many bad lottery tickets. So a low probability event, which will happen very unlikely over a long period of time, has increasingly become more likely, and we are seeing today the consequences of that happening. This was something which scientists talked about for many years. The Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness and Innovations came about precisely to make vaccines in such a situation. It's doing a great job now. There have been multiple warnings as recently as late last year from the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board, and so on. So ecology needs special attention, not just from the point of view of spillover of zoonotic disease, but how fragile that situation is for a multiple variety of other reasons in terms of conserving our biodiversity and in terms of having a healthy planet. Again, if you come to environment, there too, the growth of cities taken as an inevitable consequence of growing economies has meant an extraordinarily large conglomeration of people coming together in a manner which increasingly sharpens the divide in populations in terms of wealth, but also results in dehumanizing structures, which again we think are inevitable and are a consequence of quote unquote. Our environmental impact needs to also change in terms of bringing back livelihood and quality of life and a decentralized mechanism of growing our economies. Now, the third point I mentioned was climate change. Climate change is a consequence of industrial growth over decades, and really since humans started domestication of plants and animals 10,000 years ago, there has been a steady increase in impact on the environment as a consequence of our growth. We've had to invent the Haber-Bosch process for making fertilizers so that we can have unlimited yield, various kinds of impacts on industry, iron ore, energy generation mechanisms, and so on. All of these have resulted in incredibly valuable, high quality of lives in some societies, but at the cost for those outside, whether it is the in terms of environment, in terms of natural products, or in terms of societies, the cost has been negative. So in other words, there is no free lunch, but we've got a free lunch for many societies at the expense of other societies. Now, today's world has changed dramatically. It's no longer possible or no longer simple to grow at the expense of the other, and the other are other societies, the environment, and so on and so forth. And therefore, we need a way to look forward through this pandemic on a new way of growing, which allows sustainable development, yet does not damage the environment and our ecology. Is that theoretically feasible? It looks very difficult. You can always do that well in a closed system. Can you do it in a much more open system? Now, there are some aspects of technology and science which have been truly transformative, which have allowed this kind of a decentralized, much more sustainable growth. And those relate to the more ready availability of power, the more ready availability of machines which run on low power because of great inventions such as the power transistor. And these two and the internet allow local manufacturing, local design-centric products, and the export of designs and the export of components across city, state, and other boundaries much more better. And therefore, there is hope for a much more decentralized economy. Now, let me end by some specifics about the pandemic. And just as Chas pointed out, we here have seen an extraordinary coming together of people ranging from abstract mathematicians and to astronomers and everything in between. People have come together to solve immediate problems in extraordinarily successful ways. These are making ventilators, oxygen support devices, repurposing drugs, patient management, contact tracing apps, and so on and so forth. And this incredible coming together has been possible because of the investment over the years in scientific and industrial research of quality in many of our ecosystems. Cities such as Hyderabad, Pune, Mumbai, Bangalore, the Delhi region, parts of Gujarat have had incredible capability which have come, albeit in silos, but this has seen a coming together of all of these. This has happened in drug development. Chas mentioned how their drug design is available to everyone. In a similar manner, we have started a major drug discovery hackathon where hundreds of thousands of students will be trained in both computational methods as well as in computational drug discovery. Those programs started 2 weeks ago. These people will work open source, will have all the drug discovery tools, and will work in an open source manner to design molecules not just for the current pandemic, but in general. So that should see a major thrust in drug discovery programs, which should abut our already strong programs in industry and in academia. In vaccines, there's been something very remarkable which has been happening, which is our Indian vaccine industry is well known the world over for supplying vaccines all over the world. 2 out of 3 children who get vaccines through Gavi in the world have vaccines made in India. But what we've seen now is a remarkable additional layer where our vaccine companies, Pankaj Bhai is here, Serum, Zydus Cadila, Biological E, Bharat Biotech are big companies. They've gone into vaccine design and manufacturing also in an incredible manner. But we've also seen our smaller companies, startups and academic labs come into this in a big way. So there are over 30 attempts at vaccine development here, 20 of which are doing reasonably well. And the world will need many vaccines, each one better than the other, delivered better than the other. So it's not just the first past the post system. And this is going to be a big challenge. And no matter where the vaccines are made, Indian vaccine companies will play a big role in bulk manufacturing, filling, as well as in distribution. So this is something which is very positive, which we're going to see. Our health system has again come together well. The Indian Council for Medical Research, our health ministry, our different agencies such as the Department of Biotechnology, the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Pramesh is here from the Tata Memorial Hospital. It's been a big challenge at normal times to have improved communication and effectiveness between these agencies. But at these times, that has happened significantly more. It's constantly improving. There's also a lot of critical feedback in our system, and people are responsive to that feedback in a very, very difficult situation where those who have to take decisions have to get all this information and take a decision. And therefore, information and feedback from the community is very valuable, even if it stresses out decision makers who have to take decisions over a very high turnover. So these are all very good examples which we're seeing. These are tough times. These pose great strains on our healthcare system, our health line front workers all over the world, and also on our economy. And the reason I mentioned climate change, the environment, and ecology at the beginning is the solutions which we need to get out of this and go to the future shouldn't just be those which deal with the immediate future, but should also deal with the long term. And paying attention to those 3 points I outlined will show us the way forward. So with that, I'd like to end. Thank you very much.
It's a 360-degree perspective on how things have been developing. May I now call Mr. Pankaj Patel for his opening remarks, sir, from the pharma industry point of view.
Well, thank you very much. And I think I've been greatly enthused by the earlier 2 speakers' introduction. And more importantly, seeing that academics are trying to do a lot to really create new knowledge which can help to do discovery, work with industry, which is going to actually pick up those and take it forward to make it a commercially viable proposal. And I also see the governments are very positively inclined towards supporting this. I think one of the important things which we have learned during this COVID time is that we can all work together. But up till now, we have not been working together as we are working today. How do we make this a next normal for everybody? Is going to be the real thing. Can every one of us work together to face the challenges, which when it's ably actually elaborated before by earlier speakers. So what is going to be very important for all of us to really see that, can this become a next normal? What we are currently doing effort in terms of finding treatment, remedy, etc. for the COVID crisis, can we also address all other crises in the same spirit and with the same zeal? So that's the first point which comes to my mind. I think the title of this discussion today is about accelerating the development for and getting affordable medicine. So there are actually two but one thing. And I think I would like to basically say that I think very important thing for getting a kind of accelerating development is developing a elaborate proper ecosystem. And I think some of these are been practiced at the University of Oxford. And that's what we are seeing, the result of that. They've created that environment, encourage people to come in and do things, form companies out of it and create newer technologies. And I think it has all happened. So I think if I look at from India perspective first, then I would say that we need to create a kind of an ecosystem which would actually create an innovation culture in pharma and other areas of industry. And there are 5 factors which I feel very important to do it. First is that we need to create a kind of a quality infrastructure which would ensure that we have all capabilities to doing things. It should not so happen that for doing XYZ things, you have to go cross borders and start doing things, because that will consume time, increase cost, and things will get delayed. The second important point is a whole policy framework should be supportive to innovation. Innovation should be at the topmost agenda of the governments of the world, to make sure if we don't innovate, the world will not exist. And that's why it's so important that the world has to think about innovation, not restricted to pharma, but across the chain. The third and very important is to create an enabling regulatory system. One of the major challenge which we see, many years back, many molecules were being developed. Over a period, we learned more and more. But we have used that to create hurdles than to actually becoming supportive to doing more research. Why do we need such a huge data for some of the rare diseases? Why do we need so much of data before we can find a drug? Many of the drugs which currently we are using have not been tested like this, and still they work even today good. Of course, there are challenges. We want to see the safety of patients. We are concerned about it. But can we find must to have and good to have between the two? And can we differentiate between the two? Must to have has to be there in the regulatory system. Good to have, we have to debate whether we need or we don't need. I think that is going to be very important going forward. The next point is basically a strong linkage between academia, industry, and the government. And I think very ably said in earlier presentation also by Professor Charles, that we need to create something like Oxford in India. We need to create, as Professor Vijay Raghavan was saying, is to create hubs for doing research. Hubs where all the different academia is there, government research labs are there. There is also a good quality of pharma industry can come and participate into that, and create a kind of hubs where innovation will take place. One of the very important part of that would be to identify our clear priorities. And I think, as said, global priorities and India priorities both are equally important, and we need to really look at and work to encourage people to work and find out suitable funding mechanism to support those research. Pharma industry alone cannot do it, government alone cannot do it, academic alone cannot do it, but all put together can definitely achieve some milestones. So that is with respect to acceleration of research, very important to have a kind of ecosystems. The second part is affordability. Affordability also becoming a very important part, given that the economic challenges we have with respect to people, and many governments cannot afford to provide healthcare free as it happens in some of the developed economy. Make this affordable. It's going to be very important. And I want to take a simple example. Take example of HIV. When HIV crisis came, and the problem was big in terms of cost of treatment, Africa was suffering, there were issues. What happened at that time? At that time, there was a global effort to create multi-source supply, create single regulatory approval system for the global supply, and create a transparent procurement system. And through that, we could bring down the cost of the drug so low that today we are able to offer this to many of the people in the Africa and other part of. But I think apart from that, the condition which is required for creating an affordable medicine would be that we need to basically augment the supply chain. We cannot have a supply chain which is dependent on one company, one country, or one region. It should be a global supply chain, and the global participation would be very important. Things can occur and go wrong anywhere, anytime. People should not suffer. Also, we should encourage new entrants to come into this. so that supply chain can be strengthened. We should reduce the risk by creating a stability of policy around that, and of course reward those enterprises who actually help us to create affordable thing by providing them support in terms of either cost benefit or etc. There are some barriers we clearly see, and one of the biggest barrier in affordability is the regulatory. Country after country have individual regulatory system. Why do we need so many regulatory system for a drug? If a drug is good for a person in UK, is equally good for a person in India. Why would we need so many regulators to work and approve a drug multiple times before the drug can come to the market? Why people of one geography is deprived of a drug when it is already proven and is good? So we need to really say that how do we get out of this multiple regulatory mechanism and create a uniform global regulatory system? The second is the capacity around which is fragmented. How do we combine them to make it operate at scale to really bring down the cost? And also then look at, there are some high risk areas. For example, vaccines. Today, vaccines people have decided to produce before even it is approved. It's a huge risk. What is support we are providing them? It's going to be very important to look at it if we are going to look at from going forward. And I think discouraging single source supply would be ultimately the way to make the affordable medicine to happen going forward. So overall, I think what we need is that we need to invest. We need to invest in people. We need to invest into innovation. We need to invest into creating newer therapies. And we also need to invest at the same time the next part of the chain, which is the healthcare chain, where the patient actually is getting treated and done. There also will need a lot of investment, because one of the biggest casualty which has happened during the COVID time is the overall healthcare system. It is crippled. Lot of healthcare system today, if you see, has a major challenge of making two ends meet. They're working day and night. They're risking their life. They're doing everything possible. But where is the compensation? What is the future for them? Many of these hospitals will go bankrupt. Is it as it is expected? And that's why we need to really think and what we can really do going forward. So I think I would end up by saying that though there are a lot of challenges, I think we see there is a lot of opportunity. And I'm sure that we will all win at the end of this. Thank you.
Well, thank you so
So
much.
we really hope we all win at the end of it, but you've outlined from an industry point of view what's required. Of course, serious questions about public healthcare and private healthcare will have to be raised, and we'll raise that a little later. Next, I call Mr. Sharat Tyagi, Managing Director, Boehringer Ingelheim India Private Limited, for his opening remarks.
Thank you so much. So much has already been said, and it's difficult to now add more to what has already been said, but let me attempt. I think that everyone has spoken about collaboration, and to me, that's a major central theme. Why do we need a disaster to tell us that we can collaborate to work much better and in a much more efficient manner? It should become the norm. And over the years in organizations, we have been talking about breaking silos so that the organization can function much better. Well, we just have to increase our definition of the universe beyond the organization or the country to the entire humanity, to say that if everyone is able to share data, if everyone is able to share knowledge, then it can only help in reducing overall costs of development, and it will impact humanity much better. And this is, I think, what everyone has said, what Pankaj Bhai said, what Professor Bontra said, that sharing information and collaborating is the way forward. There is no other way. You cannot exist by trying to be an individual hero or an individual champion. It's not going to work. It may work. It is going to take you 20 years. If you want to change the timeline from 20 to 1 year, like we're trying to do now, there is no other way. So and we have seen, even in, to take it in a different way, we have seen in in our famous movies in Hollywood, that when you get a common enemy, everyone comes together and collaborates. Well, guys, this COVID is an alien that has come, and all the nations have to work together on it. The second point I wanted to highlight is what COVID has shown us is the real importance of technology, and this is something very close to my heart, although the typical pharma company doesn't deal with it, is in what I would call as a healthcare equivalent of an early warning system and diagnostic. The rush with which people are trying to figure out whether I have COVID or I have antibodies is telling you that technology actually, and this is where I also go to, what Professor Bountra said, that there will be a $1 trillion data-based, technology-based healthcare company, which will actually get into these kind of areas as well. How early can you diagnose cancer? How early can you diagnose a viral disease? How early can you know that I'm heading for a healthcare crisis and therefore I can do interventions well in time? To me, it's like having the onboard diagnostic systems on a high-end car. You know well before your oil is going to come down that I'm heading for an oil change. I'm heading for a tire pressure change. Before the accident happens, you pretty much know that you need to take interventions. And I believe that technology and data, which is once shared, will tell us actually what those markers or those indicators are, which will help you to get to those early warning systems in healthcare. And that is also something which we really need to focus on. And I'm quite sure that a lot of the tech giants are actually focusing there. We're already seeing that in diabetes care, in cardiac care, in blood pressure. But I think the rare diseases, and especially in cancer, which is so difficult because we all know lung cancer, by the time it's diagnosed, is pretty much a death sentence. I mean, why should it be like that? So I think these are some of the areas which will go a long way in it's not just about making medicines affordable, it's about making healthcare affordable. How early can I understand that I'm heading for a crisis and therefore can deal with it? And I believe that this is where data sharing, artificial intelligence, collaboration, analytics, the tech giants, the academia, the countries, the companies, everyone can come together and deal with it. At the end of the day, the purpose is to be beneficial for humanity, not just about one district or a city or a country or whichever kind of a silo you want to think of. One last point, which Mr. Vijayaraghavan also mentioned, is I think our very ancient advice of health being wealth, Jaan hai to jahan hai. I mean, that's in Hindi. But the fact remains that if we can change the way the well-being of a community or a country can be measured by the health and well-being of citizens rather than pure financial economic factors, that has to become a measure on how well you are doing as a society. And I'm quite sure that this crisis will make us change the way we are looking at investing in healthcare, not just into medicines and pharmaceuticals overall, but how do you make sure that your citizens, the entire world, is getting healthier and getting better cared for? Thank you. I hope I saved you.
Right, thank you. Those are very, very important questions that you have
Raised, and
raised.
I'd just like to get our special guest. I couldn't introduce him because he hadn't joined at that time, Dr. C.S. Pramesh, a man who's taking all that medical science and research and administering it at the Data Memorial Hospital to patients at the grassroots level. Mr. Pramesh, Dr. Pramesh, your observations on the comments that have been made and perhaps a question to the panel as well, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here and for the opportunity to listen to these four completely outstanding talks. I think each speaker has brought in an element to what we are discussing, which is unique. And by no way does it mean that the speaker who came in last had less to contribute. So, Dr. Tyagi, you can rest assured that you all brought in your own unique perspectives to this. I think all of the four speakers focused on the need for collaboration, the importance of having the right people in the right place, multidisciplinary, breaking silos kind of approach to research. We also heard the importance of innovation. And though I'm completely a fan of generics by the way that it brings costs down, I think innovation is extremely important if medical science has to progress. And I think all the speakers alluded to that. So I'm going to be a little provocative in asking the speakers one question, to which I'll request a very brief and quick response. We've heard a lot about breakthroughs in medical science. Unfortunately, if you look at the global landscape, they touch a very small proportion of the patients who would actually benefit from it. And a large part of it is because of the prohibitive costs that are associated with it. A vast majority of people in low and middle income countries go into bankruptcy because of out-of-pocket expenditure on healthcare expenses. Now, we could always blame governments for not spending enough on public healthcare, but the reality is governments will do what they want to do. How is it that we can get industry and the people who are actually bringing in the product to the market to deliver? And could one method be that in addition to looking at pure efficacy of a new product that's brought into the market, we also bring value into the equation? Should approvals for drugs, interventions, and new procedures be based not merely on efficacy, but also on the cost of the drug? And how do we bring cost effectiveness into the picture? So the question is open to all panelists here.
It's a very interesting question.
Dr. Charles Pampa, you want to start with a brief answer to that, and then we will go the full round of all three other panelists as well.
Well, I can just say very quickly, I mean, the recent partnership with AstraZeneca and the University of Oxford, I mean, AstraZeneca have said that during the course of this pandemic and afterwards, they're going to make that vaccine available to low middle income countries at cost. And I think that's an amazing achievement. And during the course of the pandemic, the university is not going to benefit financially at all from this partnership. So I think it is possible, by bringing all the stakeholders together, to create these sorts of partnerships, to focus on, you know, trying to treat as many patients as quickly and as cheaply as possible. So that's all I would say. But thank you for the question, Pramesh.
Dr. Vijayaraghavan, Professor Vijayaraghavan?
Well, you know, the important, thank you, Pramesh, for that. The important challenge in our times have been, you know, Chaz outlined the major diseases which need addressing by new drugs and how difficult that innovation has been. We need to bridge the gap between truly innovative approaches which focus on success in attacking these diseases with a partnership between those approaches and clinical benefit. All too often, for a variety of reasons, the broader clinical benefit from a public health disease perspective, even if you take cancer, are relatively modest from the new drug development compared to what is needed. And therefore, I would urge that true innovation now requires not only approaches of new drugs and therapies, which are very important, but to link those new drugs and therapies at development to smaller communities and perhaps even individuals. That requires addressing innovation from the context of individual or group nature-nurture interactions rather than high-end laboratory development, then taking into clinical trials in specific groups, which have seen some dramatic results, but in many cases have seen modest clinical benefit. So there are new innovative paths available, which are not going to be inexpensive by any means, but would require greater partnership between patients, clinicians, and societies.
Thank you so much. And before I get Mr. Pankaj Patel to answer that specific question, may I just add to that question and say, sir, in your speech, you spoke about motivation for those who are in the front line and fighting. How do you balance public-spirited research and the profit motive of market economics and the investments that one has made? I think that also touches the question that Pramesh sort of raises. How do you balance these two aspects?
So you need to unmute yourselves.
So thank you, and I think you made a question more loaded But let me just try to address it. I think the first is, if you look at the drug cost consists of several factors. One is the cost of actually producing it, which is the input which goes into it, people who work on it, and ultimately make it reach to the patient. That's the one cost. The second cost is the research cost. And if you look at the research cost, the 20% of the cost on research is what we do in our laboratory. 80% is what we spend in clinical trial, which happens at Dr. Pramesh, your clinic, or somebody else's clinic or hospital. And that 80% cost is actually increasing the cost of development significantly higher than what is currently today. And over a period, we have experienced that the clinical development cost has gone up haywire globally. A, because there is larger data requirement, and B is that because of the so many kind of parameters to be measured along with while doing clinical trial, number of testing clinical biomarkers to be found out, it costs enormously. So that's where the cost of research has significantly gone up compared to what it was maybe 20 years back, for example. So, and when you have that cost, it ultimately gets loaded into the drug price cost. And that is another part which is happening. The third is that overall, when people do research, there is no surety that I do this research, and finally at the end of this research, I'll be able to sell the product. There is nobody who says, okay, you innovate a drug and I'm going to buy XYZ from you, and that will ensure you a market share. So you need to really work after innovation to also create a market for it. So whole cycle, it's actually consuming a lot of resources, and all this is a cost overall, which ultimately finally goes to somebody who is going to pay for it. Now the question is, what should we really do? So there are two parts of the things. One is there are many diseases where the cost of treatment is not that high, but there are some diseases where the cost of treatment is very high, and that is where the government have to basically differentiate between the two and do something. So I run a cancer hospital in Ahmedabad, which is a Gujarat Cancer Research Institute, and we treat cancer patients free who are below poverty line. And the government of Gujarat gives us the money to do it, and we are able to manage it. Now the question is, how are we able to manage it? What is the cost to the government? Significantly lower. Overall, whole of Gujarat, which has a population of something like 3.5-4 crore people, have total spend on different government schemes annually is less than 500 crore rupees. That money government does have. Question is, creatively, people have to find out solutions by which either the government or a philanthropic society will provide, or ultimately we end up paying from our pocket. And I think we need to get out this thing, particularly for those expensive medicine, to make sure that they are being offered by the government. Let me end by saying that all of us are working on COVID vaccine. Tomorrow, I'm going to produce 100,000 doses of COVID vaccine. I don't know who is going to buy.
Right.
It's not US, where before people have a vaccine, there are billions of dollars of vaccines orders are being placed before. So you need to understand that there is a lot of risk. All of us are taking the risk. We are able to take the risk because we have a running business. But the question would always remain that we need to really find out balance between all these. Industry must take risk. I'm not saying that. But at the same time, it's going to be very important that we understand, we balance this to make sure that finally we are able to provide medicine to people at affordable prices, or that treatment cost becomes reasonable. That's what ultimately what Professor Pramesh also was talking about.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tyagi.
Quick response to that. Is it a matter of trust now, given the amount of investment that that rides on, and the kind of different public-spirited individuals, the approach and the needs that they have vis-a-vis market needs? There seems to be a sense of trust that's also lacking as well between two sides. Would you believe that that's also an important issue to address?
Well, trust may be an outcome, but I don't think that's the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is that there are different models all over the world on how a patient can get a medicine from what you can call from an affording perspective. Now, whether it's a reimbursement model by the governments, whether it's an insurance-based model, or it's an out-of-pocket model. In India, we seem to get much more, I would say, conscious of it, because largely it is out of pocket. Most of the patients end up paying it for it themselves. And I think more than the cost of the drug, it is a topic about access and how do you get a patient to be able to afford the medicine without having to just shell it all out from his pocket. Insurance is one of the ways that it can happen in a country like India. Then, of course, there are going to be what I would call, what Pankaj Bhai also referred to in a way, is the PPP, the public-private partnerships, where the government provides a certain amount of infrastructure support. The industry has always been opening to provide its own bit of share. So I think there are several models in which it can be worked out. I would say, and I would really appreciate the way Pankaj Bhai put it. I think it's wrong to paint one party black by saying that, okay, uh, you're just making these drugs so expensively. There is a cost to it, there is a risk to it. There is even the risk of failure of even at the earlier stages. You end up investing in the development of 10 drugs, and you may only end up having one or two which can go through to the final phase 3 in clinical trials. So there is a huge amount of risks that pharmaceutical industry undertakes when they do development. No one ends up sharing those risks, right? So I think it's a complex issue, and I would not like to add much more complexity to it, but instead, except by saying that we need to work consciously in a trusting way to say industry is interested in having the patients afford the drugs, the government is interested in it, the patients are interested in it. Instead of pointing fingers, is there a way we can all sit together and find out what's the best way to do it? And I believe that in India, insurance-based model, the way Ayushman Bharat is going, there is already so much happening. We just need to take it forward.
Mr. Bountra,
I
I
just
just
want
want
to
to
bring one
bring one
quick
quick
question to you in the fact that is this the state that we are in at the moment in terms of healthcare, exposed perhaps by the pandemic that one faced, as you point out, is it ushering in a new era of collaboration, which is international, internal, intergovernmental as well, or do you feel that it's still not created that kind of a platform?
Thank you. I'm very hopeful. I'm sure we will learn and put in place all the lessons that we've learned over the past few months. We will implement sort of things going forward. I am confident we will have a lot more collaboration amongst all the stakeholders. I'm confident we will have a lot more collaboration between countries, a lot more collaboration with industry, and I do believe that people are more now aware of the importance of good healthcare and also the importance of good science. I made some pessimistic remarks earlier on about sort of how many people this has killed already and countries going into recession and so on and so forth. And that is absolutely going to happen. And, the only thing that's going to save us or get us back to the sort of life we enjoyed maybe in December last year is having some sort of vaccine. I have a mother who's 86 years old. She's basically for the past 4 months been confined to her house. She's not gone out. She's not let visitors in. That's not a good quality of life. And so I am confident we're going to work much more closely together. I've never been a fan of nationalist agendas because I think, the problems the world is facing, and we've talked about them, climate change, healthcare, etc., etc. The only way forward is international collaborations. My sincere apologies, but I have to go. And can I say thank you, Toby and Sambrata, for the invite. And it's a pleasure to meet you all. And I hope I will have a chance to follow up with you and maybe we can do something together, something exciting, but importantly, something impactful. So thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Chaz Bountra. Glad that you could join us. I wish we could ask you one quick question on, do you have a roadmap and a timeline by when there will be a vaccine that will be ready?
Well, I can assure you, my colleagues, Adrian Hill and Sarah Gilbert and Andrew Pollard, literally, if I said to you, they are working day and night. You know, we will get it as quickly as we can. But I think, as somebody said earlier on, you know, there's 150 vaccines in development at the moment across the world. And what we need several of them to make it all the way. And because we're going to need, you know, samples to give to 8 billion people across the planet. And of course, it may be that we have to give a vaccine this year and we have to give another vaccine next year, another vaccine the year after, etc. I mean, this is a virus which unfortunately is likely to sit on this planet forever. And it's going to be a bit like the sort of common flu, etc. So, but you know, obviously, I hope the Oxford vaccine makes it all the way. And, you know, that was obviously very exciting, but yeah, we need several of them to succeed, and we need to do everything we can to help each other, support each other, because at the end of the day, honestly, you know, we're all going to be patients one day, or somebody we care about will be a patient. And whenever I talk to patients, they don't want to hear excuses. You know, even a new drug tomorrow is too late. They want it today. So, but please forgive me, I have to leave.
Thank you very much for joining us. We won't keep you away. Maybe that will expedite the bringing up of a vaccine if you devote your time to that. So thank you so much for being with us here on this webinar. But we have a lot of questions that have come in for Professor Vijayaraghavan as well from the audience here. First one is from within the Synergia staple itself, Chief Information Officer Ajay Sir, Major General Ajay Sir. He's raised the issue of public healthcare systems vis-a-vis private healthcare systems, and he speaks about, wants to know, has there been a concrete push? Will there be a concrete push towards devoting more attention towards public healthcare? And given the fact that the pandemic has exposed the public healthcare system, while at the same time the public healthcare system is the one that has taken maximum burden in fighting it from a front line, how do we augment that public healthcare system? That's the question for me.
Well, thank you very much. I think people like Ramesh are better equipped to get into the details. But let me tell you, let me start by saying that, you know, India's efforts during this pandemic have been led by our public health system in extraordinary ways. We have, you know, people on the ground, our ASHA workers. Fundamentally, women and children are looked after at the Anganwadis. The Panchayati Raj system takes, you know, administration of healthcare to the villages. It's pretty impressive, extraordinarily impressive, to see how structures which are diverse and covered by different ministries at the ground level have come together to raise public awareness and put in place public health measures. Now, this points, and this you see a diversity too. Some states are doing a better job because they were better prepared. Some states have responded better. Others are learning how to do so. Now, the principal challenge in this pandemic is, how does one reach higher levels of healthcare into the far reaches of each district and each village in the country? Now, that requires not just the reaching of equipment and facilities, but an enormous training of nurses and doctors and healthcare professionals of different kinds on a scale which is unimaginable. Now, there has been a massive move by the health ministry to have teleservices of various kinds, telemedicine and teletraining. And pushback on that is that you cannot substitute years of medical college training by a rapid training through telemedicine or tele-teaching. That may well be true. It is indeed true. But in many ways, it is better than not having that training. But what indeed has been increasing now, and I think will have a lasting impact, is that the post-COVID telemedicine and e-pharmacy systems will allow a much better reach across our system. So in summary, we're going to see an enhanced effectiveness of the public health system by government interventions, which are both on the ground as well as IT driven. But you're going to see a layering of that in partnership of small, medium, and not so medium entrepreneurs from the private sector to put in healthcare delivery and insurance on a much larger scale. So I think we're seeing the evolution of a more Indian context, practical model which is coming about.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
So I
much.
must say that at the Synergia Foundation, they have been very, very committed to the idea of bringing research on affordable healthcare. Samrata Shetty from the Synergia Foundation, Chief Operating Officer, joins us as well. Samrata, your thoughts on the discussion that we've had and perhaps the road ahead?
You'll have to unmute yourself. Right.
Yeah. Good evening. Thank you, Veera, and thank you, Dr. Bantra, Professor Vijay Raghavan, Mr. Patel, Mr. Tyagi, and Dr. Pramesh. I would like to highlight the work that we do on affordable healthcare. We at Synergia Foundation from the last 9 years have been working on a novel nanotechnology platform to cure several diseases that affect the central nervous system. This technology allows rapid onset of action, increased bioavailability, as well as enhanced stability, all of this by minimizing the side effect. To add on, it's non-invasive, cost-effective, and hence making it an affordable and novel platform. I take pride in saying that we've recently got patent in the US and in Japan. In the past, we worked with Médecins Sans Frontières in building affordable treatment globally for AIDS, malaria, and TB. We already have a track record of developing quinine resorcinol injectable, which is a 5-compound drug for malaria for the World Health Organization and Ministry of Western Africa. I can proudly say that we're the only supplier of this injectable from this part of Asia to supply it to Africa. I thought it was extremely important to mention about our commitments towards novel and affordable healthcare. And let me now take you through our journey by showing you a video. Veera is a video. Veera, I think you'll have to unmute.
We're playing the video, but I'm not sure that the panelists can see the video.
That's all right. Right. Sorry, we'll try and send that video across.
No, we're not able to hear it either. It's okay.
Right. So we've got another quick question to Professor Vijay Raghavan from
For example, if one keeps wearing masks and has effective social distancing, then the level of infection in the population required for herd immunity comes down. That happens because herd immunity effectively comes when you have R naught, that the number of, which is the number of people you infect, an infected person infects. That -1, R naught -1 divided by 2 is an approximate measure of what herd immunity is. So if you can effectively reduce R naught in any way by social distancing, masks, by the way the virus behaves, for example, the way people respond to the virus, you will have herd immunity at smaller levels. So it's possible to get that sooner if we have put in all these measures. Otherwise, levels of infection such as 20%, levels of prevalence such as 20% or 30%, which you see all over the world, may well lead to future rounds of infection also. We don't know. And we don't know how long this immunity in this group will last. Is it 3 months, 6 months, or 1 year? So there are many unknowns at this stage, but I think we'll know the answers over the coming few months.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. I just want to get quick words from all our panelists before we close the event. And of course, if you're ready right now, I'm sorry, before your final comments, we'll just play the video again, the video that we were playing earlier. I think you will be able to see this now.
Lost a moderator.
We've lost a moderator.
The movies come on the screen. I can see. I was
Right. Thank you so much, Toby.
A
Simon.
little bit of technical glitches, but I think we've had a fascinating discussion on an issue of grave importance to humanity as a whole at this moment. Thank you all for tuning in and watching in. Of course, we will share further inputs from these conversations from the Synergia Foundation. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Sorry.